I was 17 when my parents left me alone for the first time for an entire weekend. They'd gone to my aunt's wedding 3 states away, and I convinced them I was mature enough to handle it. Honestly, I was excited. No curfew, no rules, just me and the remote control. Friday night went perfectly. I ordered pizza, stayed up until 3 a.m. playing video games, and felt like the king of the world. Saturday was when everything changed. Around 11 p.m., a thunderstorm rolled in, the kind that shakes the windows and makes you grateful to be inside. I was watching a movie when the power flickered, then died completely. The house plunged into darkness, lit only by occasional lightning flashes. I grabbed my phone for the flashlight and headed to the basement to check the breaker box. That's when I heard it, a wet, dragging sound coming from upstairs, like someone in soaking clothes walking across the hardwood floor. My blood went cold. I stood frozen at the bottom of the basement stairs, listening. Another wet footstep, then another. Whoever it was, they were moving slowly through my house. I crept back upstairs, staying as quiet as possible. Through the darkness, I could make out a shape in the hallway. A man, drenched from head to toe, water pooling around his feet. He was just standing there, facing my parents' bedroom door. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "How did you get in here?" The man turned his head slowly toward me. In the next lightning flash, I saw his face, pale, expressionless, with dark circles under his eyes. He didn't say anything. He just stared. I ran to the front door, but it was still locked from the inside. All the windows were secure. There was no way he could have gotten in without breaking something. Yet there he was. "I'm calling the cops," I shouted, pulling out my phone. The man tilted his head to the side, like a confused dog. Then he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "I used to live here. I just want to see it one more time." "I don't care," I said, my hand shaking so badly I could barely dial. "You need to leave now." He took a step toward me, water squelching from his shoes. "Please, just let me stay a little longer. It's so cold outside." I dialed 911 and screamed into the phone that there was an intruder in my house. The operator stayed on the line with me, but the man didn't leave. He just kept walking closer, leaving wet footprints on the floor. "Where's your family?" he asked. "Where did they go?" I backed into the kitchen, grabbing a knife from the block. "Stay away from me." The man stopped at the kitchen entrance. He looked at the knife, then at me, and smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that made my stomach turn. Then the power came back on. The lights flooded the kitchen, and I saw him clearly for the first time. His clothes weren't just wet, they were rotting, falling apart. His skin had a grayish tint to it. Sirens wailed in the distance. The man looked toward the front door, then back at me. "I'll see you again," he said. Then he walked into the living room, and I heard the back door open. When the police arrived, they found the back door unlocked, even though I swore I checked it earlier. They searched the property but found no one. What they did find were those wet footprints leading from the living room to the back door. The officer asked me to describe the intruder. When I finished, he got quiet. He showed me a photo on his phone. A missing person case from 6 months ago. A man who'd lived in my house 15 years ago had wandered away from a care facility during a storm and was never found. It was the same man I'd seen. They found his body the next morning in the woods behind our house. The coroner said he'd been dead for months. I was 19, living in my first apartment. It was a basement unit in an old Victorian house. Cheap rent, which was all that mattered to a broke college student. The landlord lived upstairs with her elderly mother. The apartment was one large room divided by curtains, with a tiny bathroom in the corner. The only window was a small rectangle near the ceiling that looked out at ground level. Not ideal, but it was mine. Everything was fine for the first month. Then I started noticing things. Small things at first. My food would be rearranged in the mini fridge. A chair would be moved. My toothbrush would be wet when I hadn't used it. I blamed it on myself. Maybe I was more absent-minded than I thought. But then the noises started. Late at night, I'd hear scratching sounds coming from inside the walls. Not mice. This was deliberate, rhythmic scratching, like someone was trying to get my attention. It would go on for hours, moving around the perimeter of my apartment. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. As I walked across the cold floor, I noticed the curtain dividing my sleeping area from the kitchenette was pulled back slightly. I always kept it closed. Through the gap, I could see someone standing in my kitchen area. A thin figure, completely still, facing the wall. My heart hammered in my chest. "Hello?" I whispered. The figure didn't move or respond. I fumbled for the light switch and flipped it on. The kitchen was empty. I searched every corner of my tiny apartment. No one was there, but on my kitchen counter, there was a note written in shaky handwriting. "Thank you for sharing." The next morning, I asked my landlord if she or her mother had come into my apartment. She seemed offended by the question and insisted they respected my privacy. She had a key for emergencies only. I changed the locks anyway. That night, I set up my laptop to record while I slept. I positioned it to capture the entire main room. If someone was getting in, I'd have proof. I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of my laptop snapping shut. I shot up in bed and turned on the lights. The laptop was closed, unplugged, and moved to the other side of the room. My door was still locked from the inside. The window was sealed shut. I'd checked it obsessively. With trembling hands, I opened the laptop and checked the recording. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then, at the 1:47 mark, a panel in the wall behind my kitchenette slowly opened. I hadn't even known there was a panel there. A person crawled out. They were impossibly thin, wearing clothes that looked decades old. They moved in jerky, unnatural motions, like they weren't using their own body. For 20 minutes, this person walked around my apartment, touching my things, smelling my clothes, eating my food. They sat on my bed while I slept, just watching me. Then they walked directly to the laptop, stared into the camera with hollow eyes, and closed it. I didn't even pack. I grabbed my keys and phone and ran out of that apartment in my pajamas. I drove straight to my parents' house 2 hours away and never went back. My landlord kept my security deposit, claiming I broke the lease. I didn't fight it. Some things aren't worth the money. Later, I learned that the Victorian house had been a boarding house in the 1920s. A tenant had supposedly gone missing, never found. The landlord's family had owned it for 3 generations. I often wonder if that person is still living the walls, waiting for the next tenant who won't ask too many questions. I was 21, house sitting for my professor while she was on sabbatical in Europe. It was a sweet deal, a beautiful house in the suburbs, all to myself for 3 months. All I had to do was water the plants, get the mail, and keep the place tidy. The house backed up to a wooded area, very private and quiet, perfect for studying without distractions. I'd been there about 2 weeks when I first saw the woman. I was making coffee in the kitchen one morning when movement in the backyard caught my eye. A woman in a white dress was standing at the edge of the woods, maybe 30 yards from the house. She was just standing there, facing the house. When she saw me looking, she raised her hand and waved. I waved back, assuming she was a neighbor, but something felt off. She didn't smile or move otherwise, just kept her hand up in that wave, frozen. I went about my morning routine, and when I looked again, she was gone. That night, I saw her again. Same white dress, same spot at the edge of the woods. This time it was dark, and she was illuminated by the back porch light. She was waving again. I didn't wave back. I closed the curtains and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my stomach. The next day, I mentioned it to the mailman. Do you know if there are any trails back in those woods? I keep seeing someone standing back there. His face went pale. You should probably keep your curtains closed at night, he said. He wouldn't explain further, just hurried away. That night, I kept the curtains closed like he suggested. But around midnight, I heard tapping on the glass. Gentle at first, then more insistent. I knew I shouldn't look. Every instinct told me not to, but I couldn't help myself. I pulled back the curtain just an inch. She was right there, pressed against the window, her face inches from the glass. Her hand was up in that same wave, but now I could see her expression. Her eyes were wide and desperate, her mouth open in a silent scream. I stumbled backward and grabbed my phone, but when I looked again, she was gone. I called my professor, but it went to voicemail. I couldn't just leave. I had an obligation. So I stayed, but I boarded up the back windows from the inside with furniture. The tapping continued every night, sometimes on the back windows, sometimes on the front door, sometimes on the second floor windows, always at midnight. During the day, I researched the property. I found an old news article from 15 years ago. A woman in a white dress had gone missing after hiking in those woods. They'd found her car abandoned at a trailhead, but never found her. The article included a photo. It was her, the woman I'd been seeing. On my last night in the house, I woke up to silence. No tapping. I felt relieved until I realized why it was quiet. She was already inside. I could hear footsteps on the stairs, slow and deliberate. The sound of that white dress dragging across the floor. She was coming up to the bedroom. I locked the door and pushed the dresser in front of it. The footsteps stopped right outside. Then came her voice, barely a whisper through the door. Please help me. I'm so lost. I just want to go home. I stayed silent, barely breathing. Please, she begged. I've been trying to find my way back for so long. Won't you help me? I don't know how long I sat there with my back against that dresser. Eventually, the sun came up and the footsteps receded. I left that morning and never returned. I called my professor and told her there was a family emergency. She found someone else to watch the house. I still dream about that woman sometimes. That desperate wave. That pleading voice. Part of me wonders if she really needed help, if I should have done something. But the bigger part of me knows that some things that seem lost don't want to be found. They want to take someone with them. I was 20 when I moved into a studio apartment downtown. It was affordable, close to my job, and recently renovated. The building was old, built in the 1940s, but my unit looked modern and clean. I worked night shifts at a hotel, so I was home alone during the day, sleeping while everyone else was at work. The building was always quiet during those hours, which I appreciated. About a month in, I started hearing humming while I tried to sleep. It was faint, like someone humming a lullaby in another room. I assumed it was a neighbor and invested in earplugs, but the humming got louder. Even with earplugs, I could hear it, a woman's voice, always the same melody, over and over. It seemed to be coming from inside my walls. I complained to the building manager. He seemed confused and said no one else had reported any noise issues. He checked my walls with some kind of device, but found nothing unusual. Old buildings make sounds, he said with a shrug. You'll get used to it. But I didn't get used to it. The humming became constant, following me from room to room. Bathroom, kitchen, bedroom. It was always there, always at the same volume, always that same tune. Then things started moving. I'd put my keys on the counter, and they'd be on the coffee table. My books would be rearranged on the shelf. My clothes would be folded differently than I'd left them. One afternoon, I came home from running errands to find every single picture frame in my apartment turned to face the wall. That's when I set up a camera. I pointed it at my living room and left for work. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, I felt my blood run cold. At 3:47 a.m., the screen went fuzzy with static. When it cleared, a figure was standing in the middle of my living room. A woman in an old-fashioned nightgown, her long hair covering her face. She was humming that same melody. For 10 minutes, she just stood there, swaying slightly. Then she walked directly to the camera, tilted her head, and the footage cut out. I grabbed my essentials and checked into a hotel. I called the building manager and demanded to know the apartment's history. At first, he resisted, but I threatened to break my lease and make a scene. Finally, he admitted the truth. In 1952, a woman had died in my unit. She lived alone and wasn't found for 3 weeks. The cause of death was listed as natural causes, but there had been rumors of something darker. The building had tried to keep it quiet, renovating the unit repeatedly, hoping to erase the past. But tenants kept leaving after short stays, always complaining about the same things. Humming, things moving, a presence. I was the 14th tenant in 5 years. I broke my lease and moved out immediately. I lost my deposit in 2 months' rent, but I didn't care. Some places aren't meant to be lived in. Sometimes, late at night when everything is quiet, I still hear that humming, faint and distant, like it followed me. I tell myself it's just my imagination, just a memory of those terrible weeks. But deep down, I know the truth. Some things don't stay where you leave them. Some things follow you home.